How many times do we say to ourselves, if only I knew then what I know now? Hindsight, it's a perfect science. It's 2020 vision. I've had an incredible life, and today I just want to share a few of my stories. And with that 2020 vision of hindsight, I can share them far more accurately now than I could when they were actually happening. It took me a long time to come to Christ. On the day that I was born, I was adopted by the most incredible couple, Monica and Gordon. Monica, an amazing woman of faith. We lived in a tiny town of Fort Victoria in what was then Rhodesia, and I grew up in a Christian home knowing full well of the existence of God. But as I grew into my teens, because of the lifestyle that I was living, having God in my life was very inconvenient, so I deliberately shut him out. At about the same time, somewhere out there, a man that I'd never met had got married, had 4 beautiful children, and he felt convicted to tell his wife and his children that when he was at school, his girlfriend had given birth to me, his son. And from that day, his family had prayed daily for me. When I left school, our country was still at war, and I volunteered to an elite military strike unit called the Rhodesian Light Infantry, and our training was incredible. And our sole purpose was to eliminate the enemy, and I've got to say, we were very good at our job. During the last year of the war, I didn't get home much, but I would call home using reverse charges from one of those little red telephone booths that we used to find on street corners. And I remember one of these seemingly insignificant phone calls. My mom telling me that her church minister that morning had asked the congregation if anybody had a spare bed for a few nights to accommodate a preacher that would be visiting the town to minister. And if I wasn't going to be home for a while, if I wouldn't mind her offering my bedroom. That was the typical kind of thing that my parents did. Now, our military missions were very often against enemy numbers that far exceeded our own, but because of our training and our air support, we were an invincible unit, and success was invariably on our side. In 1979, we were tasked with eliminating an enemy base camp that was deep in Zambian territory. Our commander comprised of 86 guys, and the information we were given that it was home to approximately 700 soldiers. Like many raids that we had conducted in the past, the planning was precise, it was focused, and it was highly classified. But this mission didn't go according to plan. Unfortunately, the information had been leaked to that enemy base camp, and they were prepared and they were waiting for us. They pinned us down with a relentless barrage of mortar and anti-aircraft fire, wounding 8 of our guys and hitting one of our strike fighter jets. What was supposed to be a one-day raid had turned into 3 days from hell. We were pinned down, outnumbered, outgunned. 10% of our commando were injured. We were running low on ammunition. Our food and water supplies were pretty much done. And to top it all, we were a long, long way from home. Now, I want you to notice the timing of this. At 7 a.m. the next morning, our commanding officer briefed us that our SAS reconnaissance unit had visually verified that at midnight, a further 500 well-armed enemy personnel had entered the base camp. And our CO was tasking our troop of 12 guys, that's 3 sticks of 4, to approach the camp and to gain further intel on the location of the anti-aircraft guns and the enemy combatant positions. We knew without any doubt that this was our final hour. 12 against 1,200. None of us were going to survive those odds. Over the next hour, we slowly made our way off our mountain and across a ravine and then up a totally exposed mountainside to approach the base camp of the enemy. Somehow, we miraculously reached the perimeter trench line without attracting any attention from their snipers. We climbed into the trenches, fully expecting to be gunned down at any second, but only to find that the whole camp had been abandoned. It made no sense. There was no military logic for this. This could have been their greatest victory during the war. Our commander flew back to our base in Kariba by helicopter, all knowing literally that we had dodged a bullet that day, feeling kind of numb that we were still alive. But moreover, we knew that this was a battle that we had not won. A few days later, I called my mom, and she asked if I was okay, and I said, "Sure, I'm okay. Why are you asking?" She said, "A strange thing happened a few nights ago. I was woken up, and I knew that I had to pray for you," she said. "I went through to the lounge, and I prayed for you from midnight until 7 a.m. that morning. I don't know why, just wanted to make sure that you're okay." Well, I can still hear her saying those words to me, but now, in hindsight, that picture is just so much clearer. My dad, Gordon, died in 1989, and my mum, Monica, died in 2000. 6 months later, I got a phone call from Home Affairs telling me that my biological parents had been trying to track me down for the last 4 years. And shortly afterwards, I got to meet my biological father, David. On my first meeting with him, he asked me what my surname is now. I said, Ascough. He said, Ascough, man, I know that surname. He said, about 20 years ago, I was doing ministry around the country, and I flew my little Cessna into the town of Fort Victoria, and I stayed with a couple with that same surname. Their son was away on military operations at the time, and I slept in his bed. What are the chances? Again, that 20/20 vision is showing a far more clearer picture now than when my mum asked me 20 years earlier if I was going to be home that weekend. I had no idea that through my life I had been the focus of prayer by some incredible believers. Monica, David and his wife and his children had all held me in their daily prayers for years, not even knowing if I was still alive. And for the last 18 years, my beautiful wife Mags has been an amazing prayer warrior for me. And despite all this, I persisted with shutting God out of my life, not thinking that I needed him as my aviation career flourished. But in November 2017, even though my career was literally soaring, my marriage and my private life was crumbling around me. And I found myself in a hotel room in London, begging the Lord to help me. Drenched in tears, I desperately tried to get a meeting with my pastor back in South Africa, and the only time that he could see me was on the 29th between 11 and 12 in the morning. As I sat on that bed in that hotel, I took a small Holy Bible, placed by Gideon's, out of the bedside drawer next to me, and I just held it as I cried and I prayed for help. Suddenly I felt an overwhelming calmness come over me as I looked at this Bible, which I embarrassingly have to say I knew very little about. But I said to God, is this you here with me right now, or am I just imagining this? I want to pick up the Bible. I want to read something that is going to prove to me that it's you with me here right now. You know how sometimes we have conversations in our own minds where we both ask and answer our own questions? And I wondered for a moment if this wasn't going to be one of those. But the voice that came into my head was not what I expected. That little voice said, what book? Well, my mind raced for a few seconds, and I thought, okay, well, I was christened Jeremy by my mother, and I know that there's a book in the Bible called Jeremiah. I'm going to go with Jeremiah. That little voice then said, what chapter? I had no idea how many chapters are in that book. But I thought, okay, I'm seeing the pastor on the 29th. I'm going to go with chapter 29. It persisted. What verse? Well, this was now getting insane. But I was seeing the pastor from 11 until 12, so I went with verse 11. And then there was silence. Well, I fumbled my way through the Bible until I found the correct book, chapter, and verse, and I began to read. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. I sat in stunned silence for several minutes with tears streaming down my face, but filled with a joy that I just cannot describe. That night I accepted my everlasting Father, Jesus Christ, into my life. Up until that point, I thought I'd done a pretty good job with my career, but when you ask God to sit in the captain's seat of your flight deck of life, you better buckle in, because life takes on a perspective that we can never achieve on our own. A few months later, I was blessed with an invitation to be part of the One More Orbit team, breaking the world speed record for circumnavigating the Earth. And shortly after this mission, God planted a seed in me that I should be heading in a different direction. But this was the middle of the COVID saga, as airlines were laying off thousands of pilots around the world. So it was a huge decision, and it came with a lot of discussion and a lot of prayer with my wife. The very last flight of my career was from Moscow to Zurich. And as we flew across Eastern Europe at 43,000 feet, I was feeling apprehensive about my decision. We asked air traffic control if we could climb up to 49,000 feet, as this was going to be the last time that I would ever fly at that height again. And as we reached flight level 490, I opened the sun shield on my side of the cockpit, and this was the sight that I was presented with. In 35 years, I've seen thousands of contrails, but I've never seen anything like this. My anxiousness and my doubts completely dissipated as I gazed upon God's perfect signature in the sky. I've learned a couple of things on this journey I've had so far. Never take the small, seemingly insignificant things for granted, because our God is a master planner, and His attention to detail is way beyond our comprehension. And never stop praying for the loved ones in your life who need God. As much as they may think that they're able to deny Him, He's closer to them than they can possibly imagine. May I end by saying a special thank you to the individual in your organization who arranged to have that Bible placed in that bedside drawer of that hotel room of that hotel that night. Thank you, and God bless you.